Everybody remembers their first wave, whether it be in the ocean, their first break in business, or their first big win. I'm David McClymont, a former competitive surfer now turned C-suite executive leading the Palm Beach Symphony into its 48th season, and your host on the Waves of Success podcast. Hey everybody, welcome to Waves of Success. I am thrilled to be on location today at Wellington National Golf Club, right here in Wellington, Florida, home of the Swings for Strings charity golf tournament supporting the Palm Beach Symphony, which is providing world-class music to South Florida and operating in its 48th anniversary season. I am thrilled to have two incredible guests with me today. I have Katie Wu, who is the staff reporter for The Athletic, and I have Marlene Rocks, who is the founder of CL Rocks Corporation Sports Agency. Ladies, thank you so much for being with me.
Our pleasure.
So, word on the street has it that there's been a pinch hitter provided for the Swings for Strings golf tournament. Originally, it was supposed to be Paul DeYoung playing, but baseball started back up. He had a conflict, and they went to the bullpen, and they brought in someone by the name of Katie Wu.
That is true. I told Paul the other day, it's very rare that as a reporter you get to pinch hit for anyone, so I better not strike out. And he let me know he expects nothing less than a win today.
Well, I will say I had the pleasure of playing with you, I guess, a couple of weeks ago with Paul, and you've got a pretty solid game. Did you grow up playing?
I did. I grew up playing golf with my dad and my brother, and we had a course right behind our backyard, very easy for us to go to. And then I played a little bit in high school, and I just kind of stuck with it. I always thought it was a good hobby, a good way to connect and meet people, and it is a little fun, assuming you hit the ball where you want to. But I've really always enjoyed playing golf, and it's been nice to kind of see it carry me through now part of my professional career.
Where did you grow up, Katie?
I grew up in Vacaville, California. It's a very small town right in between Sacramento and San Francisco.
So share with our audience how you got into sports and how you became a writer covering teams like St. Louis, where Paul plays for, and they're the hometown spring training team right there in Jupiter, Florida, where I live. So talk a little bit about how you got involved with sports and became a staff writer for baseball and everything else.
Sure. I've come from a very athletic family. Sports were always a big thing. My mother is a professional track and field runner. My dad played all sorts of sports growing up. And so sports were really ingrained in my lifestyle. And, it was evident very on in life I was never going to be a professional baseball player. But I always had such an affinity for baseball, and just watching it, the storylines, I really appreciated the grind of a 162-game season. I just had no idea that you could make a career out of it. As a woman growing up, you don't see a lot of opportunities for women in the sports industry, let alone baseball. But luckily, with great support back home and great trailblazers before me, I was able to combine two passions, which was baseball and writing, and make it into a career. And it's been a whirlwind. Sometimes I still am not quite sure how everything ended up the way that it did, but I'm so thankful for it.
So one of the foundations of the show is to discuss people that were influenced and mentored. Obviously, a lot of the people that we have on this show have gone on to great success and ridden their wave to success. But it's fascinating when you look back and realize that they always had somebody or a group of somebodies that influenced them. I understand your grandfather was a big influence on you with becoming was it a Red Sox fan?
So he was a Red Sox fan, but I grew up a Giants fan. My dad tried very hard to get me to be an A's fan, but when you grow up in the Barry Bonds era, you don't really have a choice. You become a Giants fan. But yes, my grandfather, my mom's dad, Bruce Abel, was a huge influence on, he, again, was part of the big sports culture in my family, huge baseball fan, huge Boston sports fan. And though I didn't grow up cheering for the same team as him, we were able to bond and connect over just our love of sports. Unfortunately, when he passed away last August, that was a very hard time for me. It was the first time I really kind of experienced death so close to home. But I think that's what makes baseball so impactful for me, is that there's so many storylines and connections that go beyond the box score, really. Right, so when I'm watching these games, and I know the Cardinals have a series up at Fenway in Boston this year, and they never really go there. For me, it's a way to kind of remember the person who's no longer here, remember that influence that he had, and I don't know, in a weird way, it makes it feel like he's still there. I know that is a little cliche, but I think that's what makes baseball so impactful for so many people, is the relationships that you build throughout the sport.
Well, I think the same could be said for all sports, couldn't it?
Absolutely, absolutely.
What sports did you play growing up?
I played softball, basketball, and golf. Ironically, softball was my least favorite of the three. I really enjoyed basketball the most. I still will watch. I'm so excited the women's Final Four is coming up. I used to watch Stanford basketball all the time as a kid. But really, I like all sports, and I try to kind of branch out as much as possible, but I feel very lucky to be covering baseball and to be covering a team as successful and big on tradition as the St. Louis Cardinals are. It's been a wonderful experience so far.
And speaking of women in sports, talk about a trailblazer, Marlene Rocks, who founded CL Rocks Corporation, which is a sports agency that represents many talented athletes, including Paul DeYoung. Share with our audience how you got started with that and a little bit more about the great relationship you have with your son and how you've helped support your son onto where he is today.
Well, I was influenced by the late Clyde King, who was the GM and confidant for 32 years of George Steinbrenner. He was a family friend, and he knew that Bert had the skill to be a pitcher, but he said he didn't have the health. So he said, God opens one door, if another one closes, he says, why not form an agency? And he can be in sports and represent ball players. So I did that with him, and everybody said, how's that going to work, a woman running an agency? I said, well, we're going to run it together, so it won't be just me. And one of the things that Clyde felt I had to offer was that I'm bilingual Spanish speaking from having lived in Mexico with family and gone to school there. And it was a great change for me after 35 years of teaching in a New York City high school, doing something in sports, which I always liked. I played basketball in college and volleyball and oddly enough, what we call stickball in the streets, because there wasn't really that much open to women at that time. It was a different era. But the fact of the business, I was inspired by two women who were part of the women's movement, Gloria Steinem and Betty Friedan. And I felt if they could do something like that, why can't I do the business part? I grew up hearing all about it from Clyde and from my husband's friend, Ralph Kiner. So I said, well, I'm going to do it. And they were very encouraging. And so I formed it with Burton, and he had some Latin players, and they took a liking. We fought like we were kin because of the cultural connection. And to this day, his players become like part of the family. And they enjoy that because it gives them a touch of home as well. And so this is where we're at, and Paul is one of Burton's clients, and he's a gem. And I got to know his family and his grandparents, and we became friends with them. And I've really enjoyed this, and other women can get into it. There are women who are doing agencies and other things, but this was the beginning for me, and I don't know if there are other women who own part of an agency.
I think it's interesting, both of you talked about something I think so important in business and also in personal life, which is relationship, right? So for you, Katie, you have to have relationships with the teams, with the players. They have to be altruistic, they have to be genuine. Marlene, for you, and I've watched both of you in action, you and Burton, you've done a phenomenal job building that agency with relationships. I think it's a lost art. Talk a little bit, Marlene, about how important relationships are for building an agency in a day and age where I think everything is so transaction-oriented.
Well, it gives, for the young players, it gives them a sense of belonging as to a family, and many of them like that. They're young, they're away from home, and it presents a closeness. And many times, they need a little bit of advice, and other than what they get in the locker room from their peers. And so they seem to like it, and I have them come to our country club for golf, so they like that too. We're members of St. George's Country Club, so they can play golf, and it gives them a sense of belonging, not just, here we are and that's it. So that part is I enjoy, the fact that they're happy to come and play golf and visit with us, and it's helped Burton as well, because he loves golf, and I did play until I got injured, and I'm thinking of going back. My friend Luba Randall will help me get back into it, and hopefully I can enjoy St. George's the way I had Paul came to play at our other clubs, and so did some of the other fellas, and they really enjoyed it. They felt like they weren't just ball players, they were human beings as well. And That's what I'm enjoying about this, the relationships with these young people, because I'm used to working with young people, and it filled a void that I had after retiring from all those years of working with high school kids.
Katie, how important are relationships for you in your world?
I think building relationships is the fundamental must-have in reporting. I mean, and I'm not just talking about with players, but also with coaches, with the front office staff, with other agents, with everyone that you interact with. I think the basis of being a good reporter is knowing that the relationships that you build are built on accountability, they're built on trust, and they're built on communication. The sad reality of being a reporter is not every single person is going to like what you write every single time, and that's okay. But what's important is that you have those relationships where if something or someone doesn't like what's being said or thinks it's unfair or thinks something's off, we can have these conversations and we can talk it through. So that's something that I really tried to push in my first year in St. Louis was, hey, I really want to build these relationships with you. I want to get to know you beyond what you do on the field, because who you are off the field is going to help me so much more in covering you fairly and objectively. So that's something that I really try to push is relationship building. I really think that if you want to be a good reporter, if you want to be a good, whether it's online, print, whatever media you decide to do, the first thing that you need to establish is relationships.
They're critical for the success, both personally and professionally. And it doesn't matter what industry you're in. It's interesting. So we're on the other side of the fence, right? So as CEO of the Palm Beach Symphony, we're constantly reaching out to the Wall Street Journal, to the Robb Report, to Bloomberg, trying to get them to cover us nationally. And you have to be respectful to those journalists to make sure that you're delivering to them the things that they want in a format that they want, because they're getting inundated. I'm sure that you're getting inundated 24/7 about people wanting you to cover certain things. So that goes back to relationship. Let's transition a little bit to negotiation tactics. So my question is, between you and Dr. Rocks, Marlene, who taught Burton to be the master negotiator that he is? Because I spent the past 6 months with him over the summer negotiating handicap for this golf tournament, only to have him stack the team, bring in an A player. So who was the...
I guess it's me.
It was you
It
that
was
coached
me.
Burton on being the master negotiator?
Yes.
I should share with you some of the text exchanges about him getting into the barometric pressure of Florida relative to mountain time,
Right.
and why he should get 6 more strokes. So it was you?
It was me.
Okay.
It's something that you learn to do. You have to learn to negotiate when you're facing, 17, 18, 19-year-olds in a classroom and their parents. So you learn to negotiate and how to hold your ground without being too aggressive or offensive. So I guess he heard that and saw that, and it transferred over.
Well, it worked out well. Let's transition to overcoming adversity. One of the premises of Waves of Success is to talk about how people fail forward, right? Life is not simple. It's not a straight line. It's sort of a staggered staircase. So, Marlene, let's start with you. I know that you've had many challenges, both personally and then also dealing with Burton at a very young age with some of his code blues and things like that.
Right.
Share with the audience how you overcame those obstacles and how you
Well,
helped raise Burton to also learn how to overcome those obstacles.
Actually, it changed my personality. I was always a very quiet, retiring person. But in order to defend him with the medical profession and with people in general, and also with the educational system, which at that time wasn't very cooperative. We did not have the law for disabilities. And I learned that I have to speak up, otherwise I would lose him. And so I changed my whole modus operandi, and I said, I'm not going to be afraid of these people. I am going to talk back to them, and if need be, I have to be his advocate, because there was no advocate for somebody with a disability. And what I found, which was really eye-opening, was the hardest place to get anything accomplished in his behalf was the school system. And having to argue with them and discuss with them each time made me more aggressive. And so I taught him, you have to stand up for yourself and don't be intimidated by them. Otherwise, you won't make it, because, breathing is what we do. And if you can't breathe because of the environment or whatever is going on, then you won't be here. So you have to speak up for yourself as well. And that's what we taught. I tried to teach him. That was one of the things. The other thing, people said, well, you can't, women shouldn't be own an agency. I said, why not? I said, it makes no sense. We can't just all be, bookkeepers and nurses and teachers. We have to be able to do other things, and that's what happened. So we were able to do that, and I think that was one of the things I had to overcome, coming from an era where women weren't supposed to do all of those things.
And with that said, I think things have improved, haven't they? Over the past 10 or 20 years, you see so many more females that are now coaches in the various professional sports
Not
programs, and then you see CEOs of Fortune 500 companies that are... But how challenging was it for both of you? Katie, was it challenging for you to get into this world?
Absolutely, and I think it's challenging to break into any industry, especially sports writing. There are such limited jobs and limited opportunities, but I'm so proud of the how we've overcome so much of our adversity as women, but I know that we have so much more to go. So for me, it's about finding an equal balance of celebrating the success of the trailblazers before me and appreciating what they've had to endure for people like me to be able to step in and deal with a lot less of what they had to, but also recognizing how much farther we have to go as a society. I mean, I'm so proud of baseball, particularly for the steps that they've taken to make baseball a more inclusive place. I mean, sports are so fun. That's what they're supposed to be, right? They're a game. And I think it'd be so boring if we just relegated it to everybody looking the same and everybody having the same opinion. That's the best thing about sports, is that everyone is different and we all have different perspectives to share. So for baseball to be incorporating more women, more people of color, more minorities, I think we should celebrate that, absolutely. But I also think we should understand we still have so much more to go in making this a total inclusive society.
I would agree with that. And I also think from a management standpoint, when you lead organizations, the same holds true too, right? If you go back and you look at Steve Jobs, how he built Apple, a lot of the biographies that are done on Steve Jobs talk about the fact that his management style was to hire people bigger, better, and smarter than him and allow them to tell him what to do. So I agree with you in terms of diversity and making sure that you surround yourself with people that aren't the same. Mm-hmm. I know that within organizational structure, if I'm leading the Palm Beach Symphony, I don't want everybody to think the way that I do, because then we're going to end up in the same destination. You have to have some creativity. Katie, let's go back to some of the challenges that you've had to overcome.
I mean, there's different ways to look at it, right? And I always thought breaking into this industry, being a beat writer, especially as a young woman, there's its own set of challenges. You have to be very aware of how you present yourself. You have to be very aware of how you dress, how you interact. If I was very cognizant when I first started working and covering the Cardinals of how I looked at people, which I think is not something that I should really have to worry about, but I do, right? I didn't want to be, if I smiled at a player, would he think I was flirting with him? Or, so I was very stoic. I very much didn't have a personality, but that's not who I am. So I've struggled very hard in walking that fine line of being myself, being an authentic, transparent reporter, and making sure I'm still keeping that line of professionalism. Now, granted, the Cardinals have a wonderful clubhouse. I think the culture there is fantastic. I've always felt welcomed and appreciated covering there. But I know that not all women can say the same. And I think another thing about this job is dealing with critics. And I'm not immune to criticism. I don't, you're a reporter. You should be open to at least some sort of constructive feedback. And I do understand that my coverage is not for everybody, and that's okay. But I did struggle at first with, I would break a story or I would have news, and some of the first replies would be, I'll wait for a real reporter to break this news, or I'll wait until someone more, I don't know, official or anything really will break this. And I remember when I broke my first major news story, most other publications were crediting the first male to break the story, not me, who had it. So for me, that was just, tempering my ego, tempering my expectations, and realizing if I keep working hard, if I keep pushing the envelope, I will get the credit that I feel like I deserve. And it's not like I do things for notoriety, of course, but it's a little frustrating from a woman's perspective to see you do all the hard work and then it be diminished to either, oh, you didn't get it, or, oh, she only got it because, she's nice to these players, or they like the way that she looks, which I don't think anyone should be evaluated by that in any profession. So for me, it again goes down to balancing, all of these things based on professionalism versus who I am as a person, and trying to find that same balance. And I still struggle with that, but I believe it's getting better.
So one of the things that I did early on in my career with the management philosophy was to look at it through what I call the filtration system. So I try to filtrate Because obviously, like you said, Katie, you do want to take some of the feedback and apply it. If there's things that you can do better, I want to be very open as the CEO of an organization that if somebody's criticizing me, if that's valid criticism, I want to be able to embrace that and actually learn and grow from it. But then in terms of the filtration process, you also have to filtrate just like a really good water filter does to sort of get rid of the impurities, of the complaints that are just unsubstantiated complaints, people just trying to be mean or evil or...
That's a great way to look at it, I think. It's just filtrate, constructive criticism can be a great thing. No one's out there claiming that they're perfect. I've learned a lot from feedback. It's just knowing when to draw the line between what's helpful and what is out there to really just be a negative presence and something that no one really needs.
And I think that mentality applies definitely for athletes, right?
Sure.
So if you look at any of the athletes, and we don't have to mention any names, if you have a particular athlete, let's say it's a baseball player, and he's going through a slump, and he traditionally is a great player, and he's having a bit of a downtime in sports, people can be downright mean. And I think you have to be strong mentally to be able to filtrate a lot of those comments and stick to the core of who you are and what allowed you to get to that level of success. Marlene, talk to us about what's next for CL Rocks Corporation.
Well, it's a boutique agency, and it's going to stay that way. We don't plan to be a big corporation, and our motto is we treat the players as family, and when you do it as family, it doesn't overtake you. You have to be there and care for these players and guide them and see that at the end of their career, they are financially well off and they don't end up having to pawn their trophies or anything else, and teach them values of what they have, to respect and appreciate the stardom they have and the kind of life they have, because everything is taken care of for them. They don't have to book their own airline tickets. They don't wait on lines. And that's something that we want to continue to foster in the players. And so we keep the agency as a boutique agency, screening the players that we want and that Burton picks up and gets. And he does a very good job of that. He interviews them as well as they interview him. He wants to speak to their family. A lot of people say, why do you want to speak to the parents? He says, I want to see what the dynamic is, what their values are. So if their values will be in conjunction with ours, then we'll have a good relationship, and it'll be a lasting one. They won't go flitting from one agency to the other. They'll be loyal to me the way I am to them. And that's our philosophy, and that's what he's done. And he's learned that loyalty and stick-to-itiveness from the fact that he had to stick to whatever he was going to do early on in life because of the handicap that he had. Thank goodness it's gone, most of it now, but it was for the major part of his life, and it framed where he went to school, what he could do, and everything in his whole value system. And Dr. Rocks and I tried to give him an uplifting view of life that my husband had a saying that he still does to this day. 3 things. Everything will get better and better. Each day is better as it comes, and that's what you have to look at life. Don't look back. And that's the philosophy the company has, and that's what we imparted to Burton. And so he's the CEO of it. I may have funded it, but he really runs the show. And, we hope to go on like that. And what Katie says about, reporting, you have to be able to be objective, and the players have to cooperate. That's the main thing. And the gender shouldn't really enter into it as such. But at the same time, you can't pick reporters or any executive based on gender. Just because you want to have 4 women, that doesn't mean it. It has to be the qualification. And that would go for anything across the board, politically or otherwise. They have to fit the dynamic of what you're doing. And just based on, a different kind of plan because it's a woman, that's not the reason she should be hired. You have to have the same qualifications and equal opportunity, but you have to be the same as the person that you're going to replace or add to.
Marlene, I want to compliment you and congratulate you on the great job you've done with Burton. I've had the pleasure of getting to know him for the past 6 years. He's become a very close friend, and everything you said about relationships is so true. You've done a wonderful job with him. He's very creative. I think he missed his calling. I think he could have been a chief marketing officer for a Fortune 100 company because he's so creative when it comes to marketing, but he's a very genuine person and a very hardworking person. You've done a great job. Katie, I want to transition to you. Let's talk a little bit about what's next for you. Obviously, on Waves of Success, we talk a lot about goal setting. We talk a lot about the importance of having purpose. So where do you see yourself in the next 1 to 3 years? I know that's the old cliche saying, but what are some of the goals that you have on the dry erase board that you'd like to strive to achieve?
I think I want to continue. One, I would like to continue covering the Cardinals. I will potentially be in St. Louis for at least 2 more years, and just building an audience and building a way for fans to connect with these players and this team that means so much to them. To be kind of the connecting voice between this organization and fans means so much to me, and it's not a responsibility that I take lightly. I feel very grateful to be in this position where I can kind of bridge the connection between these two parties and give fans the insight to what they're looking for. So I try hard not to make it a personal success thing, but of course that does enter your mind every now and then. As long as I can keep telling these stories and making connections and making people feel connected to something that's bigger than baseball, I'd consider that a success for me. And it's just about continuing to do what I do and continue hopefully being a good example for girls that want to be in this industry, whether it's in baseball, whether it's whatever they want to do. Just continue being a positive role model in that direction. And hopefully, ideally, we'll get to some point where I no longer feel the need to say that I'm a woman baseball writer, but just a baseball writer. That's the end goal for me.
I'm so glad you brought that up because I think a lot of times when people set goals, they go back to what Stephen Covey said in the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, begin with the end in mind. But you don't think about the incremental successes or planting the seeds along the way with things that don't have a direct correlation to that end goal, which will get you to that end goal.
Absolutely.
So very fascinating. Ladies, I want to thank both of you so much for being my guests on Waves of Success. Katie Wu, Marlene Rocks, thank you so very much. We look forward to continuing to follow both of you and the great success that you have with CL Rocks Corporation and with you being a staff writer for The Athletic. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for being our guest today on Waves of Success. We're reporting live here from Wellington National in Wellington, Florida, which is the home for the Swings for Strings golf tournament featuring Palm Beach Symphony's world-class music. Until next time, please make sure you work hard to catch your wave. Thank you very much.